Hello, 605 Speaks peeps. I'm back. I am talking tonight to another South Dakota author. I feel like this has been book month, left and right. Lots and lots of things. Authors, librarians, talking about comic books yesterday. So it's like all literacy all the time. And I love it. I love it, love it, love it. This is an author who has grown up in South Dakota, started out in a smaller, more rural area, and then moved to a larger urban area. So I want to talk to her a little bit about the differences in those two living environments and things that she's seen that have grown and changed over the years. And also, we're going to talk at the end a little bit about her book and what prompted that and opportunities to see and find and read her book. So I'm going to welcome to my screen Delaine. Hello.
Hi there. Good to see you.
Yes. So thank you for volunteering to play my little project here. I have talked to, it seems like everywhere I turn around, everybody has written a book but me. And I'm like, that's good because I like to read books. So
yeah. You probably have one coming with everybody you're talking to.
I don't know that I would ever have the fortitude to write a whole book. I don't know if I could finish, whether it was fiction or nonfiction. I don't know if I have the attention span to get through the process.
Yeah.
Because it's a process.
It's a process, all right.
Absolutely. So yeah, I can't wait to talk about that with you. But let's talk a little bit about, you are a lifelong South Dakotan, correct?
Yes.
And all over here on the east side, you grew up in the Trent area.
Yes, I did. Right in the small town of Trent.
And what county is Trent?
That is Moody County.
Moody County. Okay. I thought so. I've talked to I have a couple different videos about people that were based out of the Flandreau area.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot about Flandreau. I know a little bit about Trent just from friends that have grown up about there. I believe that is Trent have a really good swimming hole?
It sure used to. I think they're trying to bring it back, but it was awesome. How do you know about that?
I just have heard about it. Tell me about the Trent swimming hole. Where did it go? What do you mean bring it back?
Well, I'm not real sure because I haven't lived there for a while. But when I was growing up, it was this wonderful pond, which I call a swimming pool. And I showed my granddaughter a picture of it. And she said, Grandma, that's not a swimming pool. But it had a long dock with a diving board and a tower that we could swim out to that was multi-levels. And we could, I didn't have the guts to dive off the top. My sisters did. But 2 diving boards. And then there was a raft we could float to. And also as a bonus, there were snakes and turtles that every once in a while we would yell out
next to you.
Yeah, we would yell out a warning. Snake.
And this is a natural water feature, right?
Yeah.
This isn't something that someone dug out and built.
It was a gravel pit that somebody donated to the town. Bill Christensen donated it. And then the people in town really worked to keep it up. And, I'm not exactly sure what happened to it, but I know that they're trying to clean it up. And they've really worked on the beach there. So, in fact, I see there's a celebration coming up on the 10th that they're going to have something in the evening.
I'll have to research that. Probably drought happened to it. It's hard to maintain those things if it's not a concrete based thing. I mean, we go through drought years and it's like, there it is. It's gone.
Right. And, the first time I swam in a city pool, I thought, oh my gosh, why would anybody want to swim in something like that?
Because there's no snakes, hopefully.
But they didn't know what they were missing.
I have a natural pond water feature out here where I live, and I was floating along in an inner tube one day, and all of a sudden what I thought was a reflection on the water was a snake very close next to me. And I don't know if I just blocked it out or forgot that we have snakes in South Dakota that will swim.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I think of that as being like part of the mystique of like the Florida Everglades. I paddled as hard as I ever have in my life to
I
get
would have
away from a
too.
snake in the water.
Yeah. I would have paddled hard too.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought my whole family's probably lucky I didn't fill it in with gravel that very afternoon. We don't have a pond anymore.
You don't because of that snake?
Well, and now I haven't, we still have the water feature, but I did just about panic that day and think that should be the end of that. But
I love water. I can see where we got to go swimming almost every day that it was open.
Yeah, I think that's one of the nice things about, even if you live, I've grown up in Sioux Falls, even if you've been a town kid, we have so many, like within easy distance of almost everywhere, natural swimming and boating and water features. And I think
Yes.
that's awesome, especially when it's 3-digit degrees like it's been lately.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Growing up in Trent, so were you a town kid or a farm kid?
Oh, I was a town kid. Oh yeah. And the big metropolis.
what was the town like growing up there? What kind of things if you went down the main street, what are things that you remember being there and being available?
Oh, the Quaker Oats elevator was right across the dirt road from our house. And then there was a city park, which had trees in it. No fence. No, I think there might have been a fence at one time, but just trees. But we called it the park.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a restaurant, pool hall, and a railroad tracks because things were hauled out of the elevator. And we would love to see the train coming by so we could yell to the caboose guy. Yeah, yep. And the engineer. Yep. And then Rossburg grocery store, and we had several gas stations and fire department and a hardware store. We were pretty booming.
And I feel like now Trent is not that booming. I feel like it's significantly smaller now from the couple times I've been through the town.
You know, yeah, it doesn't have, we had a post office. It's kind of smaller. But the thing that is booming in Trent is I think it's still called Steve's Bar and Cafe. I guess there's really good food there, good steaks. But I think the only gas station is maybe way on the east side of town where our school used to be. It's no longer there. But there's a big gymnasium that was built when I was in grade school. And when I think of that gymnasium, I think about as it was being built, my girlfriend and I were playing on the bricks and talking, and I was confessing to her that I had a crush on a boy named Dwight. And we looked up, and there was Dwight right across the street. That ended that. I didn't want to have a crush on him anymore. Now that he did.
Once he knew there was no challenge.
Yeah.
Why
go for that?
Yeah.
We also had a softball team, a girls softball team, and that got started when the gal who owned the restaurant and bar, pool hall, we called it, took a bet from somebody from Jasper, Minnesota, who said, I bet our girls softball team can beat yours. And they bet a keg on it. And then
she had to go back and get a softball team, apparently.
Yeah. And it led to having a softball team. Gals older than me started it. But at one time, I had 3 sisters. And at one time, all 4 of us were on the same team. My little sister was the back.
I hope that whoever started it won.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure Trent did. Oh, I'm sure.
Because I think that's awesome. If there is already an existing team somewhere else and you're so confident that your neighbors are going to pull together and be like, there's a keg riding on this.
Yep. And
it's our honor and a keg.
And the woman who owned the pool hall restaurant hated her handwriting. And so to arrange softball games, I would go up to the cafe and write out postcards to different towns asking to line up a softball game.
So you were a sports manager at a young age.
I was a sports manager. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to add that to my resume. I forgot.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Started your career in connecting and networking as a sports manager.
That's it.
Yeah. For the historic women's softball team of Trent.
I love that. I love the spin there, Jenny. Can I hire you as my publicist?
See, I can't write a whole book, but I'm really good at one-liners.
Well, that helps.
What were your first steps in, how come you're not still in Trent? When did you grow as part of, did your family leave Trent, or did you, as you reached adulthood, leave Trent?
Well, as I reached, I wouldn't call it adulthood. I was 17. I graduated. Our school closed at the end of my sophomore year. And then I went to Flandreau for my last 2 years. And I was 17 when I graduated. And 3 weeks later, I started school at Sioux Valley Hospital School of Radiologic Technology to be an X-ray tech. And, I thought I was grown up and knew so much, and it was way, way too young to plunge into something like that. Mm-hmm. I had no idea what I was getting into, because back then, students were the workers.
Right. There was a lot of on the job.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. On the job and on call. Had to be on call. But my two sisters graduated before me, and they went to Sioux Falls and became licensed practical nurses. And then one of them eventually became an RN and worked as that for 51 years.
There's a long history of, I don't know if all across the state, but I know up and down the east side, basically Yankton through up to Sioux Falls, up to Brookings, Aberdeen. There's a long history of nursing being where a lot of women in South Dakota, that was their
be a nurse or be a teacher.
Yep.
And I really wanted to be a teacher. And my mom, even though I got real good grades in school, my mom thought that I would go to college and fool around too much. And I don't know, maybe she was right, but I eventually did get my degree. Not in teaching, though.
What did you end up getting your degree in?
I got a degree in Health and Hospital Service Administration.
So, a lot of the same things, management and keeping track of things and documenting things.
Bossing people around.
Yeah. It actually overlaps with teaching and keeping people in check.
I actually, I did a short internship for teaching, and I had 4 back surgeries because I was injured as an X-ray technician, and that's why I went to college. But I couldn't stand that long or lean over to help students, so I gave up on that one. And back then, to be a high school teacher, which I wanted to be a high school English teacher, back then you had to have a foreign language. I don't know if you still do, but I was a non-trad student, and I didn't know that my brain could handle a foreign language.
Right. Yeah, I speak a little bit of Minnesotan.
The Minnesotan?
Yeah. Hot dish. That's there you go. But other than that, I think that I used to say my biggest regret was not learning and retaining a second language. Like, I did Spanish in high school, like a lot of people have to do. You got to get your, donde está el baño? That's what I've retained. I can ask for help to the bathroom. But I didn't. I used to say that was my greatest regret, was not having a second language. But now that I'm a parent, my greatest regret is not immersing my child in a second language while they were very young.
Oh,
I should have learned from my own desire as an adult to have one that I should have during the tiny sponge years when they take up anything.
You know the saying about when you say should,
Mm-hmm.
you're shoulding all over yourself.
I will take that to heart and maybe do some Duolingo tonight. We'll see. Once you moved to Sioux Falls as a young person, did you stay here? Is there ever a time that you left the state or left the east side of the state? No, stayed. See, that's me too. I've not seen, I personally haven't had a reason to live anywhere but South Dakota. I don't want to live. I mean, I don't mind going to visit or whatever, but I want to live in South Dakota the rest of my life. I'm very content with it, what we offer.
I thought about moving to Arizona once. We started to make some plans, and then my oldest sister got ovarian cancer, and I knew that I couldn't leave my parents at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly don't know that I could have moved that far away from my parents anyway. Early in my life, my life in Trent, I said we lived right across from the elevator. My dad had started working there. He had been working there about 3 months. And I was sitting outside in the front of our house playing in the dirt. And my two older sisters, who were 5 and 7, and an uncle who was 9, went across the street. They were going to go uptown, and they crossed the street to say hi to Dad. And our 4-year-old little brother tagged along. And accidents happen. And a big accident happened where my dad backed over Billy, and he died instantly.
And that changed the dynamic. And that's what your book is about, is that was part of the beginning of changing the dynamic of your life into many, many years beyond that.
Yeah. And I think, I think that because we lived in a small town, it might have been easier. Easier doesn't fit with the story, but it might have been easier that we had some more freedom. We could hop on our bikes and ride around town. But early on, I was the only one who looked like my brother. My sisters have had this beautiful curly dark hair and brown eyes, and Billy and I had blonde hair and green eyes.
And how close were you in age to him? Because you were all very young.
Yes, Billy had just turned 4, and I was 2 years and 10 months old. And I say that exact age because I have 4 stepchildren and 19 grandchildren, and they were all born after we were married. And I watched each one of those grandchildren at that age to see how much they knew, to see how relational they were, mm-hmm. and to see if they missed somebody who wasn't there. And they did. And what I was going to say is that my mom really hung on to me a lot because she was so afraid, because we were very active kids. And we couldn't leave the house without hugs and kisses and saying goodbye, because that might be the last time. That wasn't spoken.
Right.
That message, went in. So and then 2 weeks after my brother died, my mom had to go to the hospital for emergency surgery. She had a tumor on her ovary, and they insisted on immediate surgery. And since Dad had just started his job, there was no insurance. And but she was gone for 2 weeks. And I just know in that little child heart and brain,
you thought she was gone forever.
Gone forever.
Billy went across the street once and was gone forever.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And then his coffin was in our house.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of a norm back then.
Yeah, it was much more common in both that era as well as in rural towns, and the community would gather to where the family was.
Yeah, Jenny, you've got it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I don't know how my folks did it. It was on July 2nd, 1953.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 days later, there was a huge 4th of July celebration in Trent. And even though the organizers came to my folks and said, I'm sorry, there's no way we can contact people.
Right.
How my parents lived through that. But what they did, I just find still astounding, is that each 4th of July after that, my parents always had relatives come. People swarmed to our house, and Mom made sure that we each had a new shorts outfit and that we got to participate in the parade and the fun and games down by the pool, cotton candy, horse rides. And
what a tribute to her, because I'm sure she was aware that you guys could have imprinted anytime any death happens close to a holiday or close to a recognizable event. You kids could have all imprinted 4th of July as a time of grief. And what
yeah,
a tribute to her that right away she made sure to change that narrative for you guys. So
yeah, isn't that something?
yeah, I mean, to have realized for her that if I don't make this date okay for the rest, this is going to be a holiday for the rest of their life. For the rest of their life, they need to know that our family was okay, and
Yes.
that this is okay, and that celebration and joy is okay beyond grief. You
Yeah,
know,
isn't that something?
and
Yeah.
especially since she herself went through, I mean, I can't imagine the trauma of losing a child and then to have a physical body trauma of her own shortly thereafter.
Yes. And Dad, both of them were just amazing, but Mom was the rock. And some years later, that uncle who was standing at the scene died in a car accident. A drunk driver hit him. He was in high school, and Tommy was just 9 years older than me, 6 years older than me, and he was kind of like a brother.
When you're that close. Yeah, I have an aunt that we're 10 years apart, and
Oh,
and she was 13 years apart from my mom, her sister, and only 10 years apart from me. And so I grew up almost like she was a sister in the middle of us.
yeah, yeah,
She was both. And
yeah.
what was the title? What is the title of your book? I'm gonna bring up the just a reminder of your website there. Tell me the title of your book.
And then we laughed. A memoir of hope and healing.
And you talk about losing your brother, and you talk about losing your uncle, and
Mm-hmm.
you talk about how that changed your life as an adult. And I did read a little of that description. I tried to come into these not knowing too much, but I'm going to redirect to a question first.
Okay.
Knowing what part of your adult history was and what you went through when you came to Sioux Falls and moved to a bigger city, did you hope to find living in a bigger place after leaving a small town? Did you hope to find more of an identity of your own, not no longer in the shadow of the brother that isn't there?
I think that I wanted to escape. When I was growing up, we had so many other things also happen, but I felt like I felt like I was emotionally naked, and that everybody knew, that we must have been awful in some way, to deserve all of that happening. And, I never could understand that a lot of hard things happened to us.
Right.
And so I needed to get away and not have everybody know. everything about me.
Right.
But I'll tell you now, those old hometown friends, that we've connected on Facebook, that is terrific. There's nothing like knowing somebody you grew up with.
Right.
Having that
Sometimes it does help if they know everything. Then you don't have to explain what you do next or why you did what you did, because they're like, oh, that's,
well, Jenny, I just spoke at the Trent Baptist Church a few weeks ago, and the woman who introduced me said, here this family went through all these things, and most of us didn't know. We didn't realize they were going through all of that because they looked like they were fine.
Mm-hmm. What a very South Dakota thing.
Yeah.
We all look very much the same and very much living the dream.
Yeah. And, getting to know that, everybody has something. Everybody has grief. But, my childish mind was arrested in high school when an uncle died by suicide. And I started drinking more than I dabbled in it. And then I started drinking more, trying to cover that pain. And that was also part of, getting out of Trent, was to go somewhere else, have a new beginning. And then being in the situations in X-ray that were very, there was a huge plane, not a huge plane crash, but it was a huge trauma on me, is that there was a plane crash and we had to X-ray the bodies, and the head was carried in a paper bag. And I didn't finish X-ray school at Sioux Valley. I did at McKinnon, but in between there, I spent a week in then McKinnon Hospital in the psych ward. I just had a huge meltdown.
Oh yeah, because the not remembered things that you saw as a little kid, those things, and I wouldn't say that those are repressed memories or buried memories, but there was, because you probably didn't know what you were seeing as a little kid, the comprehension, but then those visuals are still there, and then you're seeing an adult version of those visuals, and your brain was like, hey, today we get to deal with what we didn't understand when we were 3 years old.
Right. And Jenny, I've done lots of counseling, and in one of the sessions, it was with a counselor I'd gone to for quite a while. I really trusted her, but I had what was called an abreaction. All of a sudden, there was a video playing of the day of the accident, and it was just like watching the whole thing, and scared the dickens out of me at first, but she was wise and guided me through it. And I've had some people, a few hometown people and another friend in Sioux Falls say, I don't know how you remembered all that stuff to put in your book. Well, I worked hard at healing and going through that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom was really so open with me. When I would ask her questions, she would tell me. And I did ask her one time if she was mad at Dad about the accident, because I was.
Right.
And she said, no, how could I be? I didn't know where my little boy was.
So yeah, she probably internalized and dealt with the idea of being mad at herself.
Yeah.
Because
yeah. And then, in the hospital for 2 weeks, and she couldn't be with her husband to help him take care of.
Probably spent a lot of those hours thinking, right now, I don't know where my daughters are. I'm not with them. What if something happens to them?
Exactly. Yeah.
And yet still was able to make sure that you didn't imprint a town celebration onto that, because how hard that would have been. What a a good example of community and rural life, though, that I understand that they wouldn't have been able to stop it. 4th of July in small town America is what 4th of July in small town America is.
Yeah,
It's an unstoppable thing. It's 4th of July is a juggernaut in small towns. But what a good example of what community is, that they would have even come to your parents and said, we acknowledge this is going to hurt. We can't stop it.
Yeah.
But we acknowledge your pain, and
yeah,
we're not doing this to be cruel, you know.
And Mom made a point, that I knew that they came.
Yeah. They weren't overlooking what happened, or they weren't trying to put the biggest Band-Aid ever on it.
Yeah.
But
right.
Yes.
And
you went on into health and business administration and raising a family in Sioux Falls. Tell me again, how many kids, grandkids, great grandkids, how many?
4 stepchildren. And we had 19 grandchildren. My husband died just a year and a half ago.
Oh my gosh.
19. He was older than me. And I said the kids all were born after we were married. And so I'm Grandma D. In fact, one of my grandsons, who's 31, he and his wife were in Alabama so he could get helicopter training. And they just moved back to Minneapolis. And they were going to a wedding in Lincoln last weekend, and he made a special stop for them to spend time with me, to have lunch with me. And I told everybody I knew that they were coming. And
19 grandkids. There's got to be at least one of them that'll buy you a hamburger. I mean, you should be eating free twice a month on those kids' ticket. I grew up with a step family too, though, and I have always said that I was very lucky. I was never called the half sibling, never called the stepchild. And it wasn't until my grandmother passed away, my step grandma, that I learned in her childhood that after her mother, she had a stepmother, and after her father passed away, that stepmother was done with his children.
Oh.
And she knew what it meant to be raised as a stepchild in that way. And I did not know that. And I realize now the effort she put into making sure that I was never a step kid. I was just one of the kids. And I think I love the phrase when people say bonus dad or bonus kid.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's great. And I think that's another thing about, we try and hold on to our family connections in the Midwest better, our multi-generational connections. So in Sioux Falls, so living in the big city where there's so much to do, we don't have any cool watering holes, but we have so much to do, so many things around us, yet you found time to write your book. When did you start the book?
It's probably been 11 years ago now. And I was in a writer's group at my church. I used to journal a lot. I still journal. But there was a lesson for me when I was in grade school. And I got in trouble with my parents. I wasn't in at the time. I was supposed to be in one night. And they were pretty upset with me. And they wouldn't listen to what I had to say. And they probably thought it was just another excuse. So I wrote them a note after they went to bed. I wrote them a note and left it on the kitchen table. And the next day they said, "Oh, now we get it. We understand what was going on."
Mm-hmm.
And so that told me that writing, putting things down on paper, does make a difference.
Right.
And the church I belong to now, Our Savior's Lutheran, I've been a member for 40 years. Before COVID, we had do you go there?
Is that the one that's on 10th and Cliff?
No, that's Eastside Lutheran.
So where's Our Savior?
Our Savior's is on 33rd and Summit. It's right across from Augustana College.
Okay. Yep, I visualized that too, but I grew up with many friends that went to on 10th and Cliff, and I'm like, I've been in that church. It's very, very beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
Yes. But so you were in a writers group with your church?
Mm-hmm. There were, I guess, about 10 women, and we would each write something. And I think we were allowed 2 pages. And then we would bring copies for everybody. And then we would each take turns reading our story. And then we would give gentle, loving critique to each other to help us learn and grow. And so I wrote stories, some of the tough things that happened. And I wrote about a lot of funny things that happened growing up.
When you first started writing, and even though it was for people you knew, in a way it's still for strangers, did you fictionalize your story, or were you upfront with that it was your story?
Straight up front.
And did you write about your issues with alcohol?
Yes, I did. It took some years before I was comfortable doing that, but I had also, when I had been in recovery for 25 years, I felt that God wanted me to do something more with it. And so I offered to speak to the young adults at church. And we had a fantastic youth leader then, and he had me come and talk to them. And it just felt right. And then another pastor asked me to speak to parents and their kids who were in confirmation. And then the church started an addiction ministry and asked who would like to take that on, and I did. So for 10 years, I have led that addiction ministry at Our Savior's. I find speakers to share their faith stories in recovery. And we were talking about Joan earlier, and she was the last speaker we had.
So for 10 years now, you've been leading an addiction ministry.
Addiction ministry.
Do you, is that something, and that's here in Sioux Falls with Our Savior?
Yeah.
Is that something that, what if somebody had a need for something like that, but they weren't part of your church family? How would they make their way into something like that?
Give a call, and I'd be glad to talk to them to help lead them. There are churches now that are doing it. But for a while, we had a group before COVID. We had a group called Communities Facing Addiction. And it was a number of Lutheran churches, actually. And we were trying to work towards bringing down the stigma of addiction. And I add now to and mental health.
Mm-hmm. It is interesting to me that if somebody has a cardiac condition and has chest pain, they're going to take their nitro, and they're not going to be embarrassed if they have to do it in front of anybody. They're going to take their blood pressure medicine every day. They're going to, if they're diabetic, they're going to do their insulin. These are things that we just do. But I personally deal with chronic pain, and the stigma that comes with treating your mental health or your pain as a health condition in your body and taking your medicine and being and not feeling weird about that. If I don't feel weird about that for myself to be healthy and functional every day, I have to take pain medicine. And I'm not embarrassed by that or weirded out by that or afraid to say that, because if I had seizures and didn't take my seizure medicine, I would not be functional and healthy. If I had, all of the things that are common conditions that people take medicine for every day, they're taking those to function the mechanics of their body. And our brain is a big squishy organ, just like your heart, just like your lungs, just like anything else. And if you need to take a medication to maintain that.
And to back to addiction and mental health, to bring into the public's awareness that those are both brain diseases.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that means
And they can be comorbid conditions. One
oh
can
yeah.
lead to the other.
Oh, that's how I was treating my depression.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people do, is by drinking, which is an antidepressant. Is it not anti? It's a depressant.
It's a depressant, and they're using it to level off their fluctuating feelings.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I just helped somebody last weekend who, I talked to on the phone, and she was just having a rough time. And, there's a new phone number out now, 988.
Yes.
For emergency
crisis, mental health, suicide.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really a great thing.
Yes. And this right now is Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think I always think it's interesting when we have awareness months and we try and talk more about things and get more things out. But if you're dealing with that in your everyday life, you're aware all month long, every month. Like I've done events and talked to people and things about chronic pain, but I'm not just going to talk about it in this particular week or this particular month. I'm aware of it every day. I'm aware all the time. And if somebody wants to be a meaningful part of my life, even just as a friend or an acquaintance, they have to understand that they have to be at least peripherally aware of it every day too. I'm not the friend you can give a slap on the back to, and things like that. And if I was a friend, I always like when people compare Winnie the Pooh and Eeyore, where it's like sometimes Eeyore is sad and his friends just sit with him. Like, you're aware of it,
Yeah.
And we need more. I think that's awesome that you reach out to young people about that. And before they've had stigma thrust on them. Then if somebody tries to put stigma on them, they can say, well, no, I already know this is life. This is a thing. This is fine.
Well, that's, something I've always let my pastors know about my recovery in case there's something, that I can do to help. And we've had we had a young woman who was the one that asked me to speak to the parents and confirmation students. And, to have somebody who is open to that. And I like to visit with the ministers to let them know, that it's a huge thing. And Pastor Tim is the head of the addiction ministry. It's under his job description.
Right.
I don't know how else to say it.
The umbrella of his calling.
Yeah. Thank you. That's very well put. Yeah.
And I think that in the last few years, we've had a lot more development. I don't know about statewide, but in the Sioux Falls area, a lot more development towards taking away stigma. And we have a lot of very vocal and very, like Joan talking about 10 years of art and how that's grown, and people literally getting creative in the ways to help other people express it,
Exactly.
And feel comfortable expressing it,
And
I would love to see that spread more into our smaller towns. It's just like you said, growing up in Trent, when everybody knows your story, when everybody's somehow related, when there's some element of feeling judgment or judging yourself and feeling like we can't talk about it. Everybody already knows it. Well, who do you reach out to? It gets cold and lonely on the prairie at night.
It was a thing too of, you need to keep going. And we would be going and then be hit with something else. And, my best friend in high school said, she came to my first book signing and I did readings, and she said, I had no idea that you guys were, she had no idea my dad had been
through that.
Yeah, had been in McKinnon, and so everybody had their own stuff.
We tend to keep things secret in the prairie. The you can hide a lot in the tall grass, is what I say. Just like those snakes that swim in the pond. We all like to look at everything, the beautiful fields, the beautiful mountains, everything from afar. We talk about the weather, things like that, but there can be a lot of things hidden in that tall grass, and a lot of us have the same secrets.
I have to, and that's a big part of telling my story, is that there were a couple of things in my book that my husband said, are you really going to tell that? And I said, yeah, I've got to.
Right.
It might help somebody. And so I'm quite open in my book. Some people haven't been comfortable with a few things, but it's my story. And I really feel like God called me to tell it. And I do want to say a couple exceptions. When I spoke at the Trent Baptist Church last year, I had led a retreat for the North American Baptist women at Lake Poncet. I led that retreat, and I was amazed at the openness and love. But when I spoke at Trent a couple of weeks ago, the concern they had for each other, and going through the prayer list and asking one gal, how are your migraine headaches? Are you doing any better? And then before COVID, I was out at I'll call it my home church. My home church was a little white church in the country, and then it consolidated. And anyway, I spoke there before COVID. And I'll tell you, they have an active community that cares for each other. And I've just been really touched by their openness and their wanting to serve God and wanting, I asked
and serve each other.
Yeah, serve each other. And I asked the pastor why he wanted me to talk there. And he said, I read your story and you went through all that, but you didn't lose your faith. And there's a story with my faith too, is that I believed, I'm a Christian, and I believed in God. I believed in Jesus, that he came to die for my sins. And then when I was little, they would say the Holy Ghost. And that didn't settle real well, because who wants a ghost around?
Yeah. The vocabulary, the terminology was not good with a kiddo.
Right. So
especially, I do wonder how much did you, coming from a young time in your life where you associated death and passing, did you also associate the word ghost with death and passing?
I don't know that I did that.
Just was spooky.
Yeah, it was just spooky of like Holy Ghost. Now Holy Spirit, the Spirit of God lives in me, in us. And, things have changed a lot since I was a child. There was a version of the Bible that I read that was pretty hard to understand. And now it's, you can get a Bible in more conversational style so that you still get the message. But it was when I got into recovery at the age of 36. And that's when I realized that I had a problem with alcohol. I felt like the weight of the world dropped off my shoulders, and that I could see clearer, and I was willing to go to treatment. But my husband and the people I was talking to said, no, you're so excited, go to 90 meetings in 90 days. And my husband said, you went to like 120 meetings. But I was so relieved because I thought I was crazy. But the morning after, I woke up at 6 a.m. and I felt like I was a little baby being held in my Heavenly Father's arms. And that is a spiritual experience that I love to tell it, because it's such a comfort of there's times, there's some things going on in my life right now that I can say, oh God, where are you? And yet then when I think of, these things of how I have seen, I've been really, really blessed to get to see how God has acted in my life. There's a lot of people who have not gotten to see that in themselves, for themselves. So I'm super blessed.
Do you feel not only blessed that that's been your experience, but do you feel blessed that you were aware?
Oh yeah.
Because I do think there are some people that they will have positive things act in their life, and it takes a long time before they are aware of, if ever, that they look back and go, well, that was the moment. That was the moment.
Yeah.
Do you feel almost doubly blessed that you were aware of that spiritual, physical, mental experience that you had that morning?
Totally. It's just such a precious, precious gift and memory. And, talking about living in Sioux Falls, I told you that my husband had died a year and a half ago. He had dementia and steadily lost weight and some of his memory. And we have a place in Sioux Falls called Active Generations. And
they are an amazing resource.
Oh my gosh. I didn't realize, and it was just a God thing, how a guy at church, his wife had Alzheimer's, and he was leading this group every Saturday at Our Savior's. And we were on a board together, and I just asked him something about it. And I didn't even realize what was going on with Owen then. And so he told me to call this social worker at Active Generations. And I did, and we had phone calls back and forth, and she helped me, and they have caregiving classes, which she had said, why don't you come to our caregiving class? But I read something that said, it's limited. And so I told her, well, if it's limited, somebody else should have that place instead of me. I didn't realize how bad I knew.
Very Midwestern to say, put somebody else in front of me in line.
Yeah. And I tell you, I am so glad that she encouraged me strongly. And now they have this terrific, well, they did then too, grief group that for a while it was on Zoom. And I met someone on Zoom, and then we started talking, and then we went to I took care of my husband for about 3 years. And he had a pretty rough death.
Dementia is the long goodbye. It is very, very hard.
The gentleman I met took care of his wife for 3 years. She had a very rare neurological disease, and he took care of her for 3 years. And so we started going to a grief share group together, and then we would go for long walks and talk about what had come up in the meeting and what helped us. And pretty soon we were talking about the houses and about things, and pretty soon we were laughing. And then after that group was done, Active Generations had an 8-week group, and I said that I was going to that, and he said, okay, if you are, I will too. And we have a beautiful relationship now, and I loved it that he said some people may say that we're really lucky, and he said I don't agree. I say it was divine intervention.
Because you could have definitely gone from it is very lonely to be the caregiver of someone with dementia, Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
You're alone in the room with your own goodbye, and you could have very easily just stayed in that.
Stayed in that,
Even
or
after
been
your husband passed, just stayed in that. I think some caregivers feel like, well, now I'll just wait my turn.
Yeah, stayed in that, or else gone looking for someone.
Right.
And neither one of us were looking for anyone.
And I'm sure that you have talked with and experienced and probably ministered to people that no matter how many years of recovery, it is something like that late in life that can put a bottle back in someone's hand.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. And that's one thing, is staying active. I have a support circle. It's so important to be open with people, or trusted, a trusted circle of friends.
Right.
And I had a couple gals during that 3-year time right after Owen died. I could call them and they'd come right over.
Yeah.
And
it's so much better to take someone else's hand in yours than to take a bottle.
And one thing I've done too is I love to learn and grow. And so I think it was 9 years ago, I took a spiritual direction course and met several women. One is a priest here in town at Good Shepherd Episcopal Church. And I'm in a spiritual direction book study and a spiritual supervision group where we help each other. And I just recently received my certification to be a grief educator. So well, it might sound kind of funny to say I'm excited about sharing that, but
But you have from your earliest memory known an equal amount of grief as joy.
Yeah.
And who better than to say that's the nature of our planet is we have both, and you have a choice to only accept one without the other, and not see the reason we have both. We have to grieve different things at different times.
And we can still have some joy.
Yes. And then we can enhance our lives with that joy.
And my older sister always says at the end of our conversation, and then we laughed.
Right. And then you wrote a book and called it that.
Yeah.
Did you give her credit for the title?
No, she said that after the book was.
Oh, well, at least you're telling people. If you weren't telling people, that would be, yes. Well, I love that we've chatted for an hour. I love that we've talked about your book, and I love the snapshot into that era of South Dakota and how you stayed. I have for a final sign-off thought. I told you I don't prepare for these things. I never know what I'm going to talk about to people. So if you don't like this question, you can reject it and I'll come up with a different final thought.
Okay.
If you were to look at your fellow South Dakotans and say, regardless of whatever you're going through and whatnot, how do you feel that your faith, or having faith and your Christian faith, how do you feel that has played a role in your beginning and future? Do you feel that your faith would have been as strong if you had left and went to live in New York or LA or things like that? Do you feel like the power of that faith is stronger because you stayed here, or because of the environment that we're in here?
It's hard to say, but I believe that I can only speak from having lived here, and that my faith was nurtured. And when I was in the hospital having my back surgeries, women from the church who were friends of my parents and who saw me grow up would send me cards and encourage me in my faith, even though I wasn't, really able then to act like I believed. But I found some of those cards not long ago and just thought, what a gift. What a gift. And I want to be that encouragement to others. And yeah, I like getting to know people in church, outside of church. I like the opportunity to share my faith, but I also am in situations where it's best to just listen to somebody else and let them talk about where they're at and not try to shove faith down their throat, to, witness where they're at and to just meet them where they're at.
And I think I think there's a lot of opportunity for that here in South Dakota. And I think there's a lot of different personal experiences and manifestations of spirituality and faith. And regardless of which church necessarily you attend, or if you're not attending a church, it harkens back to that many people in our area have come from families that have had farm tragedies, come from families that have dealt with suicide, come from families that have dealt with alcoholism. And you have to, it is good to see how someone else came through it on the other side. And even if you are not a person of the same faith, if faith is how they got through, it's still good to hear their story and know that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think that's the greatest gift to each other, is listening to each other and witnessing.
Being the Holy Spirit, if not the spooky ghost.
Yes. Let that Holy Spirit work.
Well, I thank you so much. I'm gonna make sure that I include the link to your website, and for anybody that sees the thumbnail of this video, that's the cover of your book, and to seek it out and to seek out more of your story, because I think it's a very South Dakota story.
Thank you, Jenny.
I think it speaks very much to who our people are. So
you do a great job.
Oh, yeah, but I'm not capable of writing it down. I leave that to people like you. All right. Well, thank you, Delaine.
Thank you.
So this is the second time that I've recorded this month that we've talked about that it is an awareness month. There are so many awarenesses. It is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, and that is another struggle that people used to keep their grief and things like that quiet. And now we've learned that it's okay to share those things. And it is Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month, and that it's okay to talk about being a familial survivor if you lost someone to suicide. And it's okay to talk about if those are feelings or things that you've experienced. And I love that we're finally growing in South Dakota. If nothing else, South Dakota is lush with the ability to grow things. And I'm glad that we're growing awareness of each other, and more than just the day-to-day. We're growing awareness of what we do in the day-to-day. So I am still looking for more volunteers all across the state. Find your friends, find your neighbors, tell them that Jenny needs to talk to somebody. I still want to talk to somebody from, like, I don't know, way up in Harding County. Bring me somebody that can tell me about ranch life. 605 Speaks is the website. Click on the Calendly link and pick a date, and we'll do it. Everybody have a lovely, lovely night. And there's a little chill in the air. Wear a sweater.